The other big story, we told you last night that General Motors and the United Auto Workers had reached a tentative deal. But today, things didn't go exactly the way you might expect. Jane Wells is in Detroit for us tonight. And I guess the headline is that the strike technically is not over yet, is it?
No, we weren't really sure what was going to happen today. For over 6.5 hours, the union negotiating team was discussing, debating, pitching to a couple of hundred union leaders from chapters around the country, trying to get them to say, yeah, take this deal and send it out to the rank and file. Finally, they agreed to take the deal, but they have also decided that workers are not to come back to work until all the votes are counted, and that may not be until a week from tomorrow. So that would be another week where these people are off the job, not getting paid, and a strike, which the Center for Automotive Research estimates is costing GM and the workers about $500 million per week. Okay, so what are they getting in this deal? They are getting a record $11,000 ratification bonus, so that'll more than make up for what they lost in wages on the strike. Also raises, important point, permanent temporary workers, which are 7% of GM's workforce, will now have a shortened path to become permanent workers. That will begin in January. The cap has been lifted on profit sharing. They get to maintain their great health care, which they only pay about 3% of the costs. However, GM's wins, 3 U.S. plants will remain closed. That could be a deal breaker, especially the one in Lordstown, Ohio. It's not going to be a GM plant anymore. Also, jobs in Mexico are going to stay in Mexico. And finally, there was sort of something weird that happened. The UAW put out its summary of the deal today. Out of it were claims that GM made earlier that they were going to invest billions in plants to retain or add 9,000 jobs. That wasn't in the UAW summary, and during the press conference, the UAW spokesman was pressed about that, like, well, how come you're not mentioning all that? He hedged a bit, said, well, some of that's outside this contract. He really didn't have a good answer. It was an odd omission. Guys?
Jane, is there any feeling as to how the rank and file might accept this or not accept it?
$11,000 is hard to walk away with, but there were a lot of Lordstown supporters here. And I don't know how representative they are, but they were adamant that without Lordstown, they were going to vote no, and there is no Lordstown. They're going to sell Lordstown to some electric truck startup. That won't be a union shop. They're going to build a battery plant nearby. That could be a union shop. It'll be a GM plant, but outside the scope of this contract. So whether that's enough to get people to vote yes, we'll know by a week from tomorrow.
Very quickly, before you go, what happens with this DOJ investigation into union leadership? Where does that stand right now? Do we know?
Well, it's ongoing, and, some of these current and former leaders are suspected of using, dues payers' funds for things. I asked some of the union members here today, does that bother you? They all basically told me, we'll talk about that later. Today, we are all one, UAW.
Jane Wells in Detroit for us tonight. Thank you, Jane.